walked into the kitchen as nice as pie, where Pa was sitting dozing in the cat's rocking chair in his gray stocking feet, and I threw down before him my full year's school report. It was pink, I remember, which was supposed to be the rosy color of success in our school, and I says, 'Pa, there's my report.' And 'Pa,' I says, as bold and stuck up as a brass weathercock on a new church, 'Pa, teacher says that one of your boys has got to go to college.' And I was grinning all the while, I remember, worse than any Chessy cat. And Pa he took my report in both his horny old hands, and he spelt it all out real careful and slow and respectful, like as though it had been a lace valentine, and 'Good boy,' he says, and 'Bully boy,' and so teacher says that one of my boys has got to go to college. One of my boys. Well, which one? Go fetch me Daniel's report." So I went and fetched him Daniel's report. It was gray, I remember, the supposed color of failure in our school, and I stood with the grin still half frozen on my face while Pa spelt out the dingy record of poor Daniel's year. And then, "Oh, gorry," says Pa, "run away and g'long to bed. I've got to think. But first," he says, all suddenly cautious and thrifty, "how much does it cost to go to college?" And just about as delicate and casual as a missionary hinting for a new chapel, I blurted out loud as a bull, "Well, if I go upstate to our own college and get a chance to work for part of my board, it'll cost me just $255 a year, or maybe," I stammered, "maybe, if I'm extra careful, only $245.50, I say. For 4 years that's only $982, I finished triumphantly. "God," says Pa. "Nothing at all except just God." When I came down to breakfast the next morning he was still sitting there in the cat's rocking chair, with his face as gray as his socks and all the rest of him blue jeans. And my pink school report, I remember, had slipped down under the glove, under the stove, and the tortoise shell cat was lashing it with her tail. But Daniel's report, gray as his face, was still clutched up in Pa's horny old hand. For just a second we eyed each other sort of dumb-like, and then for the first time, I tell you, I seen tears in his eyes. "Johnny," he says, "it's Daniel that'll have to go to college. Bright men," he says, "don't need no education." Even after 30 years the Traveling Salesman's hand shook slightly with the memory, and his joggled mind drove him with unwonted carelessness to pin price mark after price mark in the same soft, flimsy mesh of pink lisle. But the grin on his face did not altogether falter. "I'd had pains before in my stomach," he acknowledged good-naturedly, "but that morning with Pa was the first time in my life that I ever had any pains in my plans. So we mortgaged the house and the cow barn and the maple sugar trees," he continued more and more cheerfully, "and Daniel finished his schooling in the Lord's own time and went to college." With another sudden loud guffaw of mirth all the color came flushing back again into his heavy face. "Well, Daniel has sure needed all the education he could get," he affirmed heartily. "He's a Methodist minister now somewhere down in Georgia, and educated way up to the top notch. He don't make no more than $650 a year. $650! Oh, glory! Why, Daniel's piazza on his new house cost him $175, and his wife's last hospital bill was $250, and just one dentist alone gaffed him $65 for straightening his oldest girl's teeth." "Not 65?" gasped the Young Electrician in acute dismay. "Why, two of my kids have got to have it done. Oh, come now, you're joshing." "I'm not either joshing," cried the Traveling Salesman. "Sure it was $65. Here's the receipted bill for it right here in my pocket." Brusquely he reached out and snatched the paper back again. "Oh, no, I beg your pardon. That's the receipt for the piazza. What? It isn't? For the hospital bill, then? Oh, hang! Well, never mind. It was $65. I tell you I've got it somewhere." "Oh, you paid for them all, did you?" quizzed the Youngish Girl before she had time to think. "No, indeed," lied the Traveling Salesman loyally. "But $650 a year! What can a family man do with that? Why, I earned that much before I was 21. Why, there wasn't a moment after I quit school and went to work that I wasn't earning real money. From the first night I stood on a street corner with a gasoline torch, hawking raisin cedars Up to last night when I got an $800 raise in my salary, there ain't been a single moment in my life when I couldn't have sold you my boots, and if you'd buncoed my boots away from me, I'd have sold you my stockings, and if you'd buncoed my stockings away from me, I'd have rented you the privilege of jumping on my bare toes. And I ain't never missed a meal yet, though once in my life I was 48 hours late for one. Oh, I'm bright enough," he mourned, "but I tell you I ain't refined." With the sudden stopping of the train, the little child in the Young Electrician's lap woke fretfully. Then as the bumpy car switched laboriously into a siding and the engine went puffing off alone on some non-committal errand of its own, the Young Electrician rose and stretched himself and peered out of the window into the acres and acres of snow, and bent down suddenly and swung the child to his shoulder, then, sauntering down the aisle to the door, jumped off into the snow and started to explore the edge of a little snow-smothered pond which a score of red-mittened children were trying frantically to clear with huge yellow brooms. Out from the crowd of loafers that hung about the station, a lean yellow hound came nosing aimlessly forward, and then suddenly, with much fawning and many capers, annexed itself to the Young Electrician's heels like a dog that has just rediscovered its long-lost master. Halfway up the car the French Canadian mother and her brood of children crowded their faces close to the window and thought they were watching the snow. And suddenly the car seemed very empty. The Youngish Girl thought it was her book that had grown so astonishingly devoid of interest. Only the Traveling Salesman seemed to know just exactly what was the matter. Craning his neck till his ears reddened, he surveyed and resurveyed the car, complaining, "What's become of all the folks?" A little nervously the Youngish Girl began to laugh. "Nobody has gone," she said, "except the Young Electrician." With a grunt of disbelief the Traveling Salesman edged over to the window and peered out through the deepening frost on the pane. Inquisitively the Youngish Girl followed his gaze. Already across the cold, white, monotonous, snow-smothered landscape the pale afternoon light was beginning to wane, and against the lowering red and purple streaks of the wintry sunset the Young Electrician's figure, with a little huddling pack on its shoulder, was silhouetted vaguely, with an almost startling mysticism, like the figure of an unearthly traveler starting forth upon an unearthly journey into an unearthly West. "Ain't he the nice boy?" exclaimed the Traveling Salesman with almost passionate vehemence. "Why, I'm sure I don't know," said the Youngish Girl a trifle coldly. "Why, it would take me quite a long time to decide just how nice he was. But," with a quick softening of her voice, "but he certainly makes one think of nice things. Blue mountains and green forests and brown pine needles and a long hard trail, shoulder to shoulder, with a chance to warm one's heart at last at a hearth fire bigger than a sunset." Altogether unconsciously her small hands went gripping out to the edge of her seat, as though just a grip on plush could hold her imagination back from soaring into a miraculous unfamiliar world where women did not idle all day long on carpets waiting for men who came on pavements. "Oh, my God!" she cried out with sudden passion. "I wish I could have lived just one day when the world was new. I wish I could have reaped just one single solitary big emotion before the world had caught it and appraised it and taxed it and licensed it and staled it." "Oh-ho!" said the Traveling Salesman with a little sharp indrawing of his breath. "Oh, so that's what the Young Electrician makes you think of, is it?" For just an instant the Traveling Salesman thought that the Youngish Girl was going to strike him. "I wasn't thinking of the Young Electrician at all," she asserted angrily. "I was thinking of something altogether different." "Yes, that's just it," murmured the Traveling Salesman placidly. "Something altogether different. Every time I look at him it's the darnedest thing. Every time I look at him I forget all about him. My head begins to wag and my foot begins to tap, and I find myself trying to hum him as though he was the words of a tune I used to know." When the Traveling Salesman looked round again there were tears in the Youngish Girl's eyes, and an instant after that her shoulders went plunging forward till her forehead rested on the back of the Traveling Salesman's seat. But it was not until the Young Electrician had come striding back to his seat and wrapped himself up in the fold of a big newspaper, and not until the train had started on again and had ground